Warning. This video contains graphic language, extreme violence, and sensitive topics. If any of these things make you uncomfortable, this image will be put on screen as a sort of warning. Thank you for watching. Enjoy. Wim Wenders said that movies are something people see all over the world because there is a certain need for it. He said this speaking for the new German cinema movement that was happening at the time.
Si vous n'aimez pas la mer, si vous n'aimez pas la montagne, si vous n'aimez pas la ville, allez vous faire foutre.
Jean-Luc Godard was famous for saying that photography is truth and cinema is truth 24 times every second. He said this speaking for the French New Wave movement.
C'est quoi ça? C'est quoi ça? Tu vas faire quoi avec cette truc? On fait pas du tricot là? Je vais te battre. Allez. Vas-y, battre.
And finally, movies are enjoyed best with an open mind. This quote is attributed to Gaspard Noé, the father of new French extremism. And honestly, it captures the entire movement perfectly. Let's talk about that. Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, you guys are all looking at a brand new UCLA Film School reject. Can I get an amen?
Amen!
That's what I like to hear. And what kind of better way to process this reject than speaking about the new French Extremity? Yay! It's currently 4 a.m. Help. So, before analyzing the most influential directors of the movement and the films they have made, it's important to consider the roots of the movement and where the movement came from and what this means for the future of cinema. To me, the last time cinema had a true movement was during the 80s or 90s with the classic Cinéma du Look movement. So this movement was mainly known for using style over substance and mainly focused on like alienated characters. Sorry for the stutter. Some notable directors of this movement consisted of Léos Carax, bringing Mauvais Sang, and Les Amants du Pont-Neuf. The movement also brought Luc Besson, bringing the classic Leon the Professional, and it also brought Jean-Jacques Benet, bringing films such as Diva. Now, through my long time of movie watching, I also found that there are other directors very inspired from this Cinéma du Look movement, such as Jeunet and Cara, the famous French directing duo, bringing movies such as Delicatessen, The City of Lost Children, and Le Fabuleux Destin d'Amélie Poulain to the table. And hear me out. I would argue that Terry Gilliam also took some serious inspiration while producing his Dream trilogy. It's very obvious that this Cinéma du Look movement brought some very influential directors and styles to the table. You'd expect the world to follow this movement with various more cinematic movements as a response, but instead, there was silence. For decades, the movement scene remained still. There were still, without a doubt, great movies in this period, but there was an absence of movements and innovation as a whole. Now, this would have remained the same if it weren't for an angry film critic by the name of James Gant. Now, in his recent article called Flesh and Blood, Sex and Violence in Recent French Cinema, Kant coins the new French extremity term in a negative light, saying that it is a movement in which images and subjects, once the provenance of splatter films, exploitation flicks, and porn, gang rapes, bashings and slashings and blindings, hard-ons and vulvas, cannibalism, sadomasochism and incest, fucking and fisting, sluices of cum and gore, proliferate high art environs of a national cinema whose provocations have been formal, political, or philosophical, or, at their most moderate, at least assimilable as emanations of an artistic movement. Generally speaking, this man was not happy about the direction cinema was taking. Now that you have a general idea of what to expect, let's look at some famous directors of this movement.
C'est drôle. Quand on perd tout, on retrouve son chemin. C'est peut-être la fin qui me rend lucide. Oui, moins on mange, plus on perçoit de choses. Dans les camps, il y en avait qui voyaient les ondes magnétiques. Là, tout va bien se passer. J'espère. J'ai plus rien à perdre. Et je me sens plus fort que jamais. La vie, c'est un combat de chaque instant. Et pour y réussir quelque chose, faut pas hésiter. Ça demande trop d'énergie.
How can I even talk about the new French Extremity without mentioning its father and founder, Gaspard Noé? Having watched all of Noé's films, I've taken away one thing. Noé's films have one purpose, and this purpose is to drag you into this world he has created. He does this extremely well, and I love all of his movies dearly. But with that being said, I would never recommend any of his movies to anybody. Even though his films are marvelous, they're incredibly difficult to watch. This is because his films tackle extremely heavy subjects such as rape, incest, and extreme violence. His sophomore film, Irreversible, is widely known as being the most walked out movie in the world during his debut at Cannes.
Votre action sur le film. C'est scandaleux. C'est lamentable de faire des choses pareilles.
Moi, ça me choque pas parce que je trouve que la façon dont il fait le film, de le raconter à l'envers comme il le fait, je trouve ça extrêmement brillant, intelligent, voilà.
Qui viennent me voir, c'est une merde, t'es une merde, Noé. Viens voir, je fais le même métier que toi, on va se retrouver, tu vois.
Déboussolant, tragique et triste. Et ouais, bouleversant à la fois, ouais.
And though I don't blame the people who walked out of this movie outraged, there is a certain tact to all of his madness. With Noé's films, one can almost feel sophisticated as they watch one's head get bashed in. And though people may dismiss Noé's works as nothing more than gore porn, they're wrong. If you actually take time to watch his movies, you realize that there is more in them than just wacky credits, Dutch angles, bludgeonings. And if you start concentrating on his narrative style, you begin to realize that these stories are really intricately thought out. In Irreversible, for example, rather than telling the story in a linear fashion, he decided to put the scenes in reverse order, hence Irreversible. The message of this film was that
Le temps détruit tout.
And what better way to communicate this idea than telling the story in reverse order? In this film, Noé begins with the shocking scenes which is meant to conclude the story, and from there on out tells what led to this disturbing conclusion. The film's ending may appear as a calm ending at first glance, but to people who have watched the film, it's depressing. You almost feel the urge to yell at the TV to communicate to the characters to not go to the party and make the decisions they decide to make. And at the end of the film, we are left face to face with a new perception of time. A terrifying perception of time. A perception that no matter how happy you may be at one moment, everything can collapse at any moment. Hence,
Le temps détruit tout.
And life is irreversible. This is why it sort of angers me to see Gaspard's works as being dismissed so easily as gore porn, because they're masterpieces. From a coming-of-age story through the lens of cannibalism, to murdering your entire family as a metaphor of finding love after trauma, Julia Ducournau covers all the bases. Now, Julia Ducournau is personally my favorite director at the moment, and how she uses this new French Extremity movement in order to expand the movement is to use graphic body horror to express a character arc. I don't want to brag or anything, but I sort of wrote my entire UCLA film school application about her and her use of color in her newest movie, Titan, so I'm not saying I'm an expert, but I know her work pretty well. Now, what I really like about this director is that she steals from all sorts of places, and it's very obvious, but she steals in order to make something completely new. Now, obviously, living in this period of French Extremity, she's explicitly said that she took a lot of inspiration from the works of Gaspar Noé. She's also very inspired from the works of David Cronenberg, especially his movie The Fly, which is another great use of body horror in order to show character development. Just for context, The Fly is about a mad but charming scientist, played by Jeff Goldblum, who splices his DNA with a fly while trying to teleport himself. So you see him gradually turn from a character you love at the beginning of the movie, he's extremely charming, and you see him gradually turn into something you were disgusted by. Deep down you know he's the same person, but there's just a third element that changed him completely to the point of irreversibility.
I'm saying I'm an insect who dreamt he was a man and loved it. But now the dream is over and the insect is awake.
No, sir.
I'm saying I'll hurt you if you stay.
Before Ducournau, I thought The Fly was peak body horror, but obviously Ducournau proved me wrong, and I worship her. So as said before, she obviously infuses the narrative works of Cronenberg with, and this is my interpretation, the use of color of Dario Argento. Now, for those of you who don't know Dario Argento, he's this big Italian filmmaker in the 70s. He made this really famous horror movie called Suspiria. It separated itself from the classic 70s horror flicks, such as Halloween, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, through the use of color. Now, what makes one of his movies truly freaky, obviously isn't the actors' performances.
I once read that names which begin with the letter S are the names of snakes.
It's his use of a dreamlike color palette, consisting mainly of primary colors. Now, for those of you who aren't colorblind, primary colors aren't colors you see projected in your everyday life. Now, this combination between the use of his primary colors and his really wacky, eccentric shots make his audience feel like they're stuck in a really, really bad dream. Now, back to Julie Ducournau. Sorry, I'm going all over the place, but this is important. Now, Ducournau also uses really intense, saturated colors, which you don't tend to see in your daily life. She does this, I believe, to convey a similar feeling, but I think she uses it better than Dario Argento. That's right. I think she uses it as a narrative tool. So, Julia Ducournau's second feature film, Titan, is a film about how people with deep traumas develop love in their lives. As our main character Alexia rediscovers herself in this film, Ducournau's use of colors portrays the steps Alexia takes to internalize and move forward with her traumas. The film opens with Alexia's father driving a roughly 10-year-old Alexia on a freeway, letting his impatience get the best of him. Ugh, that's awkward. He swerves and crashes on the side of the road, giving Alexia a serious head injury. And before this accident, Alexia was drawn to cars. During the car ride in which the accident took place, she was shown humming car engine noises. During her recovery, a titanium plate was inserted in her head. Now physically part metal and angry at her father for causing the accident, Alexia disassociates herself from humanity and embraces motor vehicles as a source of affection. When Alexia models the car shows in her 20s, Ducournau engulfs Alexia and the car she is dancing on top of in golden neon lights. This shows how they are one. In contrast, all of the other people surrounding the car are buried in a darker blue. The colors show that Alexia and the car are bound together in desire and happiness, while the rest of humanity resides in the dark. Later, the bond intensifies, and how do I say? She has sex with the car. So in this scene, glaring shades of gold and red shine upon her body as she and the car rock back and forth. It's a wild movie. In contrast to the bright colors Ducournau uses to depict Alexia's intimate relationships with the machine, she uses cold and muted colors to depict Alexia's everyday interactions with normal people, like her parents at home and a colleague after the car show. In fact, she only seems to gain pleasure from human interaction when she kills them. In the beginning of the film, she kills a potential rapist and an innocent co-worker. The spontaneity of her killings show that in her eyes, all humans are the same. The joy of killing is shown through Ducournau's fabulous use of color. During the first act of her development, color schemes reveal the priorities of Alexia's life. Cars are life and humans are death. Now, I could go on forever about this use of color throughout the movie, but there's probably a time limit for this, and I don't want to ramble on. What matters is that by the end of the movie, as she develops a relationship with somebody, no spoilers, the colors in the presence of cars become more muted, while the colors in the presence of humans become brighter. And this is obviously a symbol for Alexia's priorities in life, and dude, I love Ducournau, and she's awesome, and I love you, Julia. Hi, Julia. She's a genius. I think it's fair to say that it's like the only director who can show somebody who can go on a full killing spree, killing her family and killing her colleagues, and f***ing a car and getting impregnated by that car, and make the audience feel like, well, we've all been there.
C'est un peu comme dans mon film, tu sais que ça se passe très mal dès le début du film, mais tu sais pas qui va sortir vivant, qui va mourir. En général, dans les films américains, c'est les plus méchants qui meurent et les plus gentils qui survivent. Dans mon film, c'est un peu l'inverse, c'est les plus cruels qui survivent.
I guess my main takeaway from learning about this new French Extremity is that throughout cinematic history, we've always experimented with extreme topics such as gore, sexual assault, or incest. You can see this in films such as Salo or The 100 Days of Sodom, or even films dating back to Un Chien Andalou. And you can always see experimentation with the camera, like in films such as I Am Cuba. But what separates these individual movies from the new French Extremity is that we've never seen a cinematic period in which the use of violence to express a certain truth about humanity is such a strong trend. This is a really unique movement, and you can already see it spread throughout the world in countries that are in France right now, such as in movies like Martyrs, for example. Generally speaking, I really enjoy these directors and films as a movement, and I can't wait to see what awaits in this movement. Thank you very much.